My parents refused to pay $22,000 to help me keep my daughter, but they spent $305,000 launching my sister's fashion boutique without hesitation. 9 years later, they showed up at my office begging for help because the business was collapsing and they were about to lose everything they invested. I did not just turn them away. I acquired their failed business at bankruptcy prices and made them watch as I built an empire from their ruins. Before I continue with this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to choose between yourself and your child. My name is Victoria. I am 38 years old, and today I am known as the most ruthless venture capital strategist in São Paulo. Fortune 500 companies pay me millions to fix their broken portfolios and salvage their collapsing investments. Technology companies hire me to rebuild their reputations after scandals. International investors bring me their problems when no one else can solve them. I walk into rooms and powerful men sweat. I speak and CEOs listen. But nobody knows that my entire empire was forged in the fires of the worst betrayal a mother could endure. Nobody knows the real price of what I have built. It started 9 years ago in a small family law office in Rio de Janeiro. The office was located in a building that smelled like old wood and desperation. Families came here to have their lives torn apart by judges. Marriages ended in this building. Custody was decided in this building. Futures were destroyed in this building. My custody hearing was scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I had not slept in 30 hours. I had been sitting at the desk of my lawyer, Dr. Sandra, going over the case file for the 100th time, looking for something, anything, that we might have missed that could help us. My ex-husband, Marcus, had hired one of the most expensive and most ruthless family law attorneys in the entire state of Rio de Janeiro. His name was Dr. Felipe Alves, and he was known for his ability to destroy mothers in custody hearings. He had a 90% success rate. He had taken children away from capable mothers and given them to abusive fathers. He was a weapon that Marcus had purchased with money. His retainer alone was 15,000 reais, 15,000 just to get him to take the case. Another 15,000 for his preparation work, another 15,000 for the hearing itself. Marcus was spending 45,000 reais just on legal fees to take my daughter away from me. Dr. Sandra was looking at me with sad eyes. She was a good woman, a lawyer who specialized in helping mothers who could not afford expensive representation. She had taken my case pro bono, which meant she was not charging me for her time. But she still needed money for expert witnesses. She still needed money for psychological evaluations. She still needed money for documentation and court filings, and all the things that made a custody case real. Victoria, she said gently, adjusting her glasses. We need to be honest about our resources. If we cannot afford expert testimony, if we cannot hire a psychologist to evaluate Isabella's emotional state, we are going into that courtroom outmatched, significantly outmatched. Marcus has hired the best. We have me, and I am good, but I am not enough against Alves. How much do we need? I asked. I already knew the answer, but I needed to hear it out loud. 7,000 reais, she said. Expert witness, psychological evaluation. Documentation of your parenting history. 7,000, and I will make sure we have everything we need to fight. Together? I asked. Together with what you have already saved? Yes. 22,000 total. That is what it will cost to fight for your daughter. 22,000 reais. It was not a luxury amount. It was not something someone spent on a vacation or a party. It was a survival amount. It was the price of not losing your child. I had 3,000 reais in my bank account. I had a car worth 10,000. I had some jewelry worth maybe 4,000. I had been working overtime, picking up extra shifts, doing everything I could to save money for this moment, and I was still short 9,000 reais. I left Dr. Sandra's office and drove to my parents' penthouse apartment on Avenida Paulista. The apartment was in a building that overlooked the entire city of Rio. The view was worth more than most people's houses. The building had a private elevator that opened directly into the apartment. It had 24-hour concierge service. It had everything that wealth could purchase. I parked my 10-year-old Honda in the underground garage and took the elevator up to the 45th floor. The doors opened directly into my parents' living room. The apartment was exactly as I remembered it. The furniture was imported Italian leather. The art on the walls was original. The floor was white marble that had been polished so many times it looked like glass. My mother, Christina, was having lunch with her friends on the terrace overlooking the city. There were 5 women sitting around a table that had been set with white linen and expensive dishes. The food looked like it had been prepared by a professional chef. The wine glasses were crystal. Everything about the scene screamed wealth and refinement. I recognized 3 of the women. They were society women, the kind of women who had been born into money and had never worked a day in their lives. They spent their time going to charity lunches and sitting on the boards of nonprofits. They were the people my mother had been trying to impress her entire adult life. My mother looked up when she heard the elevator doors open. Her expression shifted instantly. She saw me, and I watched her calculate what my presence meant. I was not supposed to be here. I did not belong in this space. I was a disruption. "Victoria," she said, her voice cool and measured. "What a surprise. We were just having lunch. Perhaps you could come back later. We are in the middle of a very important discussion." I was wearing business casual clothes that I had worn for 3 days straight because I had been working back-to-back shifts. My hair was tied back in a messy bun. I had no makeup on because I had not slept in 30 hours, and looking in a mirror felt like torture. My clothes smelled like desperation and instant coffee and the cleaning chemicals I used for my night job. I could see my mother taking in my appearance. I could see her judging me, comparing me to her friends who were all wearing designer clothes and perfect makeup and jewelry that probably cost more than my car. "I need to talk to you and Dad," I said. "It is important." Can it wait until after lunch?" my mother asked. "No," I said. "It cannot wait." My mother excused herself from her friends. She did not invite them to leave. She simply stood up and walked me toward the interior of the apartment, away from the terrace, away from the sight of her friends. She was embarrassed by me. That was clear. I was an embarrassment to be hidden away. My father, Roberto, was in his office, which was located at the far end of the apartment. The office was like something from a magazine. The desk was made of black marble and cost more than most cars. The walls were lined with books, but I suspected most of them had never been read. The artwork on the walls was valuable. The furniture was all designer pieces. Roberto was in the middle of a video conference call. There were 4 men on the screen, and they were discussing something about shipping routes and cargo management. My father held up one finger, indicating that he would be with me in a moment. I stood there, waiting, listening to him speak about profit margins and efficiency and market share. This was the world my father lived in. Numbers, contracts, business, profit. These were the things that mattered to him. He wrapped up the call quickly. "Victoria, what is this about?" he asked, closing his laptop. "I need to talk to both of you," I said. "It is about Isabella. It is about the custody hearing tomorrow." My father did not stand up. He remained seated at his desk, looking at me like I was an interruption. My mother came into the office and closed the door behind us. "I need help," I said. I placed the legal documents and the cost breakdown on my father's desk. Marcus hired one of the best family law attorneys in Rio. I cannot compete without proper legal representation. I need 22,000 Rs. That is the amount I need to properly fight for my daughter in court tomorrow. My father looked at the documents like they were trash. He did not pick them up. He did not read them carefully. He simply glanced at the numbers and then looked away. 22,000 Rs is a significant amount, he said. His voice was cold, calculated. We cannot simply liquidate assets to cover family emergencies. That is not how we conduct ourselves financially. That is not how wealthy people maintain their wealth. We have already made a major commitment to your sister. We cannot alter our financial strategy based on every new problem that arises. This is not every new problem, I said. My voice was shaking. This is my daughter. This is my child. Tomorrow, a judge will decide if I get to keep her, or if her father takes her away from me, and I cannot afford to fight for her without your help. We are supporting Chantel's boutique, my mother said. She was standing near the window, looking out at the city. We have made a significant financial commitment. The grand opening is in 6 weeks. Everything must be perfect. Chantel was my younger sister. She was 28 years old, and she had never worked a day in her life. Our parents had supported every whim she had ever had. When she wanted to be an Instagram influencer, they gave her money to buy lighting equipment and a ring light. When she wanted to be a yoga instructor, they paid for her certification courses. When she wanted to move to New York to be a fashion designer, they had bought her a one-way plane ticket. Now she wanted to open a high-end fashion boutique in Leblon, the most exclusive neighborhood in Rio. It was the kind of idea that sounded good in theory, but required actual business experience to execute. Chantel had no business experience. She had no retail background. She had no understanding of inventory management or customer acquisition or financial sustainability, but our parents were obsessed with it. They saw the boutique as a way to expand their social status into the fashion world. They saw it as glamorous and trendy. They saw it as a way to be associated with something young and sophisticated. "How much are you investing in the boutique?" I asked. "That is not relevant," my father said. "How much?" I insisted. My mother finally turned from the window. 305,000 reais, she said. "We have fully funded the venture. The build-out, the inventory, the staffing, the marketing, everything." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. 305,000 reais. That was more than 13 times what I was asking for. That was an astronomical amount of money. That was enough to not just hire Dr. Sandra, but to hire the absolute best family law attorney in the entire state. That was enough to hire an investigator to dig up dirt on Marcus. That was enough to hire a psychologist. That was enough to win this custody battle with resources to spare, and they were spending it on a fashion boutique run by a woman with no business experience. "You have 305,000 for Chantel," I said slowly. "But you do not have 22,000 for your granddaughter?" "It is not about the amount," my mother said. "It is about our commitment. We have already made decisions. We cannot change course now." "But she is your granddaughter," I said. I was begging now. I could hear the desperation in my own voice. "She is 6 years old. She is terrified. She does not understand why her parents are fighting. She has nightmares. She wakes up screaming because she is afraid I will not come pick her up from school." "Children are resilient," my father said. He did not even look at me when he said it. "Isabella will adapt. Children adapt to difficult circumstances all the time. This is not a tragedy. This is a custody matter, and custody matters are resolved every day." "It is a tragedy for her," I said. "It is a tragedy for me. Please, Dad. Please just help me. I will pay you back. I promise I will pay you back every single real. I just need help now." My father finally looked at me. His expression was hard, unyielding. "We have made our decision," he said. "We will not be changing it. Chantel's boutique is a family priority. Your legal matter is your responsibility. You are an adult. You need to find a way to manage your own problems." "I am trying," I said. My voice was breaking. "I am working 3 jobs. I am doing everything I can. But I am not enough. I need help. I need my family." "Then you should have been more careful in your choice of husband," my mother said. "You should have chosen someone more stable. You should have anticipated these problems before they arose. You are the one who created this situation by leaving Marcus." "He was abusive," I said. "He was controlling. He was manipulative. Nevertheless," my father said, "you made that choice. We cannot be held responsible for your decisions." I fell to my knees. I actually fell to my knees on that white marble floor. My mother gasped, more from embarrassment than from concern. I could see her looking toward the door, worried that the household staff might see me like this. "Please," I said. I grabbed my mother's hand. "I am begging you. Please help me keep my daughter. Please do not let her be taken away from me. Please." My mother pulled her hand away like I had burned her. She stood there, looking down at me with an expression of disgust and irritation. I could see her mind working, calculating how to make this situation go away, how to get me out of her apartment, how to get back to her lunch. My father stood up from his desk. He walked around it and stood over me. He did not help me up. He did not put his hand on my shoulder. He simply stood there, looking down at me with contempt. "Lower your voice," he said. His tone was commanding, the tone of a man used to being obeyed. "You are embarrassing us. The staff can hear you. We have made our decision. We will not be changing it. We will pray for you and for Isabella, but we will not be liquidating our assets for your legal problems. That is final." He walked to the door and opened it. It was a clear signal. I was being dismissed. "Now, please leave," he said, "and collect yourself. You are being hysterical. Go home. Wash your face. Rest. You have a hearing tomorrow, and you need to be presentable." I stood up. My legs were shaking. I walked toward the door, but I stopped for a moment and looked back at my parents. I looked at my mother, who was already walking back toward the terrace, back toward her friends and her expensive lunch. I looked at my father, who was returning to his desk, to his contracts and his business deals. "I will remember this," I said. My voice was quiet, but it was steady. "I will remember that when I needed help, you chose your status over your granddaughter. I will remember that you had the money and you refused to help. I will remember this moment." My father did not even look at me. "Then I suggest you remember to be more careful with your finances in the future," he said. "Now please go. You are wasting our time." I walked out of that apartment, and I think a part of me died right there in that hallway. I walked into the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. As the elevator descended 45 floors, I felt something inside me transform. It was not sadness. It was not despair. It was clarity. It was the moment I understood that my parents were not going to help me. They were never going to help me. I could not count on them. I could not rely on them. I was completely and utterly alone. Over the next month, I lived in a state of frantic desperation that I had never experienced before. I did things I never thought I would do. I sold my car, the 10-year-old Honda that I had paid for with my own money, the car that I needed to get to my jobs. I walked everywhere, or took the bus. The buses in Rio were crowded and uncomfortable and sometimes dangerous, but they were cheap. I sold every piece of jewelry I owned, including the engagement ring from my marriage to Marcus. The ring had been a symbol of hope once, a symbol of a future I had believed in. Now it was just cash. I sold it to a pawn shop for less than it was worth. I sold my laptop and bought a cheap tablet instead. I sold my television. I sold books. I sold furniture. I sold everything that was not absolutely essential to my survival. I picked up a third job. I was now working as a marketing consultant during the day for a medium-sized company. In the afternoon, I worked as a freelance consultant for a small PR firm, helping them manage social media accounts. And at night, I cleaned office buildings. I would arrive at the office buildings at 8 o'clock in the evening and work until midnight, cleaning desks and bathrooms and conference rooms. I was working 70 hours a week. I was sleeping in my car in the hospital parking lot because I had rented out my apartment to a family of tourists for 3,000 reais a month. I needed that money. I needed every real I could get. I was eating instant noodles from convenience stores. I was buying the cheapest bread and the cheapest cheese. I was skipping meals so that I could have more money for my lawyer. I was living on coffee and determination, and the thought of my daughter being taken away from me. My lawyer, Dr. Sandra, was touched by my desperation. She knew that I was working myself to death. She knew that I was starving myself. She told me that she would reduce her fees if I could get her half the money. She told me that she would work pro bono for the expert witnesses and documentation. She told me that she believed in my case, that she believed I was a good mother, and that she was going to fight for me. "Victoria," she told me one day as we were reviewing the case file in her office, "I have been doing this work for 23 years. I have seen thousands of mothers fight for custody of their children. I have seen the best outcomes and the worst outcomes, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that you are one of the best mothers I have ever worked with. You are fighting for your daughter with everything you have. You are sacrificing everything. That matters. That shows character. That shows that Isabella has a mother who loves her more than she loves herself. The judge will see that. Will it be enough?" I asked. "I do not know," she said honestly. "That depends on the judge. That depends on how convincing the other side is. That depends on luck and circumstance and things we cannot control. But I promise you that I will fight with everything I have. I promise you that I will not let that attorney make you look like a bad mother." I held on to that promise. I held on to the belief that my love for my daughter would be enough. Meanwhile, my phone was a portal to a different universe. a universe where my family was celebrating while my world collapsed. The family group chat titled Vibe Check was exploding with notifications every single hour of every single day. My parents and Chantel were live blogging the boutique launch preparations in real time, posting constant updates, constant photos, constant excitement. I saw videos of the boutique space being renovated. The space was enormous, probably 2,000 square meters, located in the most prestigious location in Leblon. The storefront had floor-to-ceiling windows. The interior was being transformed into something that looked like a palace. I saw videos of the marble being installed. Chantel had wanted marble from Carrara, Italy, specifically selected from a particular quarry, because she wanted the most luxurious marble in the world. The marble alone cost 12,000 reais just for the stone. The installation and finishing cost another 8,000, 20,000 reais for flooring. I saw the receipt for the champagne for the grand opening party. It was a specific vintage from France, a bottle that cost 300 reais per bottle. They ordered 80 bottles, 24,000 reais for champagne that would be consumed in 3 hours and then forgotten. I saw the invoice for the custom storefront signage. Chantel wanted her name in gold letters, custom designed by an artist from São Paulo, who was apparently very famous. 15,000 reais for letters on a wall. I saw photos of Chantel with fabric swatches, selecting which designer pieces would be sold in the boutique. Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Prada, Burberry. These were the brands that would launch her boutique. Each brand required a minimum inventory purchase. Each brand represented thousands and thousands of reais. I saw photos from the designer furniture selection. Chantel wanted the boutique to look like a luxury fashion house, so they purchased designer furniture from Italian companies. The chairs alone cost 5,000 reais each, and they needed 10 of them. 50,000 reais for chairs. I was sitting in my car in a parking garage at 11 o'clock at night. I was running a remote consulting call for a client in New York who paid me 40 reais per hour. My hands were shaking from the cold and from exhaustion. I was wearing a blanket that I kept in my car. I did not want to waste gas running the heater. Every reel of gas I did not spend was another reel I could give to my lawyer. I was doing the math in my head, the horrible, devastating math. The kind of math that makes you want to scream and throw up and disappear all at the same time. 305,000 reais. That was what my parents had committed to the boutique. Let me break that down. That was enough to hire the best family law attorney in the state. That was enough to hire an investigator to dig into Marcus's background. That was enough to hire a psychologist to evaluate Isabella's emotional state. That was enough to hire expert witnesses. That was enough to win this custody battle decisively. Instead, it was going to buy marble and champagne and designer furniture for a boutique run by a woman with no business experience. I tried to compose a text to the family group chat. It took me 3 tries because my fingers were so cold I kept making mistakes. I typed out, "Please, I am begging you. Help me. I am losing my daughter. She is terrified. She wakes up at night crying because she is afraid that her father is going to take me away. Please just help me. I will pay you back every single reel. Please. I am begging you." I drafted the message. I read it 3 times, and then I deleted it without sending it. I could not send that message because I already knew what the response would be. There would be no response at all. Or there would be a response from my mother saying something like, "Ebony, you are being dramatic. You need to handle your own problems. We have more important things to worry about right now." So instead of sending the message, I watched as Chantel posted a video of the boutique's progress. The space looked like a palace. The marble floors were gleaming under professional lighting. The walls were being painted in a soft champagne color. There were workers installing custom shelving that was made from reclaimed wood imported from Portugal. The space was transforming into something magical, something luxurious, something that screamed wealth and sophistication. Chantel was standing in the center of the boutique, spinning around, her arms spread wide, the biggest smile on her face. She was wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair and makeup were professionally done. She looked like she was in a dream. "I can feel it," she said to the camera, speaking directly to her followers. "This is going to be the most successful boutique in Rio. I can feel the energy in this space. This place is going to be iconic. People are going to come from all over the world to shop here. We are going to revolutionize fashion in Rio. She had never worked a day in her life. She did not know how to balance a budget. She did not know how to manage inventory or staff or customer relationships. She did not know how to market a business or how to acquire customers or how to create a sustainable business model. But she was going to open the most successful boutique in Rio because she had 305,000 reais, and that was enough to buy the illusion of success. I sat there in my car in the parking garage, and I felt something break inside me. Not sadness, not grief, something colder, something harder. I felt the part of me that believed in fairness and justice die. I felt the part of me that believed in family die. I felt the part of me that believed that love and sacrifice and devotion would be rewarded die. And I felt something else grow. I felt rage grow. I felt determination grow. I felt the seed of a plan begin to germinate in my mind. I made a promise that night. I made it to my daughter, even though she did not know I was making it. I made it to myself. I made it to the universe. I promised that one day they would understand the price of what they had chosen. I promised that one day they would look back and understand what they had sacrificed to buy flowers and marble and champagne for a party. I promised that I would not just survive this. I promised that I would come back stronger. I promised that I would make them pay. The night before my custody hearing was the worst night of my life. It was worse than the night I left Marcus. It was worse than the night my parents refused to help me. It was worse than any night I had experienced in the 37 years of my life. Isabella was with her father for his scheduled visitation. He had her from Friday evening to Sunday evening, every other week. I did not know if I would see her the next day after the judge made his decision. I sat in my studio apartment, the cheap studio in the suburbs that cost 1,200 reais a month, and I stared at photos of my daughter on my phone. There was a photo of her at age 3, sitting on my lap, laughing at bubbles. We were in the park near our old house. The sun was shining on her face. Her eyes were so bright, so full of joy and trust. There was a photo of her at age 4, holding my hand as we walked through a farmer's market. She was looking up at me with such love, such certainty, that I would protect her from anything. There was a photo of her at age 5, showing me a drawing she had made at school. She was so proud of her work, so desperate for my approval. There was a photo of her at age 6, taken just last month, holding a birthday cake that I had made from scratch because I could not afford to buy one from a bakery. I had baked it at night after my office building cleaning job. My hands had been sore from cleaning, but I had made the cake myself because that was what mothers did. In every single photo, she was smiling. In every single photo, she was looking at me like I was her entire world, like I was the person who would protect her from anything, like I was strong enough to keep her safe. I sat on that bed, holding my phone, and I wondered if I was going to fail her. I wondered if tomorrow, a judge who had never met me and had never met my daughter, was going to look at my financial statements and decide that Marcus, with his wealth and his new girlfriend and his fancy house in the suburbs, was a better parent than me. I wondered if my daughter would stop smiling. I wondered if she would spend the rest of her childhood wondering why her mother was not strong enough to fight for her. I tried to sleep, but I could not. I sat up all night, sitting on the edge of my bed, looking out the small window of my studio apartment. I could see the street below. I could see the city lights in the distance. I could see the life I was living, and I could not see how I was going to save my daughter. At 3 a.m, I called my father. I knew it was late. I knew I was probably waking him up. I knew I was probably ruining whatever sleep he was getting. But I had to try one more time. I had to make him understand. I had to make him see what was at stake. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. His voice was groggy and annoyed. "Who is calling at this hour?" he asked. "Dad, it is Victoria," I said. My voice was shaking. "It is 3 a.m. I cannot sleep. I am terrified. I wanted to talk to you." "Victoria, it is 3 a.m, he said. "Whatever this is about, it can wait until morning. I need to sleep. I have important meetings tomorrow." "Tomorrow is my custody hearing," I said. "I wanted to tell you that tomorrow at 9 a.m, a judge is going to decide if I keep my daughter or if her father takes her away from me. I wanted to tell you what that means. I wanted you to understand." There was silence on the line. I could hear him breathing. I could hear him trying to decide if this was worth his time. "Dad, please listen to me," I said. "Marcus hired one of the most expensive attorneys in Rio. I could not compete. But if you help me, if you give me the money I need, I can fight. I can present my case. I can show the judge that Isabella has a mother who loves her. Please, Dad. This is my daughter. This is your granddaughter. Please just help me." "Victoria," he said, and his voice was cold, exhausted. "You knew this was coming. You should have been more careful. You should have planned better. You should have made better financial decisions. You cannot expect us to bail you out because of your poor money management. This is not about money management," I said. I was crying now. "This is about my child. This is about keeping my family together. Please, Dad. Please just help me." "I cannot help you," he said. "We have already made a commitment to your sister. We have a budget. We have obligations. We cannot change course now because of a family emergency. That is not how we do business. That is not how we maintain our wealth. She is your granddaughter," I said. I was screaming now. I did not care if the neighbors heard me. "She is 6 years old. She calls for you. She draws pictures of you. She loves you. Please do not let her be taken away from me. Please do not choose money over your granddaughter. Victoria, you chose to have a child with a man who did not work out," he said. His voice was sharp, cutting. "You chose to leave him. You chose to not earn enough money to support yourself and your child. Those were all your choices. I will not be held responsible for your poor life decisions. We are done discussing this. Have your hearing. Try to maintain some dignity. And do not expect us to fix your problems." And then he hung up. The line went dead. The call ended. The connection was severed, just like the connection between me and my father. I did not sleep that night. I sat in darkness and I held my phone. I scrolled through the family chat one more time, looking at photos of the boutique being built. Marble and gold and champagne and flowers. All the things that my parents had decided were more important than my daughter. I took a screenshot of the most expensive receipt. It was for the imported Portuguese wood shelving. 30,000 reais. 30,000 reais for wooden shelves. That was more than the entire amount I needed. And I made a promise to Isabella. A promise that no 6-year-old should ever have to depend on. I promised her that I would not just survive this. I promised her that I would not accept defeat. I promised her that one day, when she was old enough to understand, I would tell her about this night. I would tell her about the night her mother decided to build an empire to come back for her. I would tell her about the night I decided to burn everything down. The custody hearing was held in a courtroom on the 2nd floor of the courthouse. The courtroom was cold and impersonal. The judge was a woman in her early 60s named Judge Helena Souza. She had been a judge for 30 years. She had heard thousands of custody cases. She cared about none of them. To her, Isabella was just another file on her desk, another custody dispute in a city full of custody disputes. Marcus's attorney, Dr. Felipe Alves, was everything Dr. Sandra was not. He was polished. He was confident. He wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than my car. He wore a watch that probably cost more than my car. He had an air of authority that came from always winning. He had won dozens of cases just like this. He had taken children away from mothers and given them to fathers who had paid him enough to care. He presented his case with the precision of a man who had done this 1,000 times before. He presented Marcus as a stable, responsible parent. He presented Marcus as a man who had a successful business, a steady income, a nice house in a respectable neighborhood. He presented Marcus as someone who could provide for Isabella. Then he presented me. He presented bank records showing that I had taken out short-term loans 3 times in the past year. He presented evidence that I had held 5 different jobs in 12 months. He presented the fact that I was living in a studio apartment in a neighborhood that he described as less than ideal for raising a child. He presented the fact that I worked night shifts, which meant I was not available for my daughter in the evenings. He made me sound like a failure. He made me sound like I was unstable. He made me sound like I was not worthy of being anyone's mother. Dr. Sandra did her best. She presented letters from my employers testifying to my character. She presented a letter from Isabella's schoolteacher, saying that Isabella was a well-adjusted child, who loved her mother deeply. She presented evidence that I had been the primary caregiver since Isabella's birth. She presented bank records showing that I had spent every penny I had on taking care of my daughter. She presented an argument about love. She said that the most important thing in a child's life was knowing that their mother loved them more than she loved herself. She said that Isabella had that. She said that I had demonstrated that love every single day. But the judge was not swayed. The judge saw a woman who was broke. The judge saw a woman who was desperate. The judge saw a woman who could not provide the kind of financial stability that a 6-year-old child needed. Marcus, on the other hand, owned a house. He had a good income as a contractor. He had insurance. He had savings. He had a new girlfriend who was a lawyer, someone with professional credentials and stability. He looked stable. He looked responsible. He looked like a good choice. Judge Helena Souza made her ruling. She awarded Marcus primary custody. Isabella would live with her father. Isabella would attend school in her father's neighborhood. I would have Isabella on alternate weekends and one night during the week. I would be the part-time parent. I would be the visiting mother. The court finds that Mr. Marcus Ferreira is the more stable parent, the judge said. While Ms. Victoria Vance has clearly demonstrated her love for her child, she is unable to provide the financial stability that is necessary for a child's well-being. Therefore, primary custody is awarded to Mr. Ferreira. Ms. Vance will have visitation on alternate weekends, and one weeknight of her choosing. This hearing is concluded. I remember the moment the words were spoken. I remember my knees going weak. I remember Dr. Sandra squeezing my arm. I remember Marcus shaking hands with Dr. Felipe Alves, both of them smiling, both of them celebrating a victory. I remember Isabella being led out of the courtroom by her father. I remember her looking back at me, confused, wondering why Mommy was not coming with her. And I remember the sound of her calling my name as they walked through the door. Mommy? Mommy, where are you going? That sound is burned into the inside of my skull. That sound is what wakes me up at night even now, 9 years later. That sound is the sound of my daughter not understanding why her mother was not strong enough to keep her. I did not cry in the courtroom. I could not. I was frozen. I was empty. I was a shell of a person walking through the motions. I stood up. I gathered my documents. I walked out of the courtroom while Marcus and his attorney celebrated. I walked into the hallway, and I stood there for a very long time, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the family group chat. Chantel was posting live from the boutique. The grand opening party was tonight. The most important night of her life. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. I scrolled through the photos. The boutique was stunning. It was exactly what my parents had wanted. The marble was gleaming under professional lighting. The designer pieces were displayed perfectly. The champagne was flowing. The people were elegant and wealthy, and exactly the kind of people my parents had been trying to impress their entire lives. There was a photo of my mother in an expensive dress, standing next to a woman I recognized from the society pages of the newspaper. There was a photo of my father, laughing with a man in a suit, clearly someone important, clearly someone worth impressing. There was a photo of Chantel, holding a bottle of champagne, celebrating the grand opening of her new business. The caption read, "Dreams come true when you believe in yourself and surround yourself with people who support you." I was holding my phone in the hallway of the courthouse. My daughter had just been taken away from me. My mother had just posted a celebration about how blessed she was to have a daughter like Chantel. My father was laughing at a dinner party while my world collapsed. My parents were investing in my sister's future while my daughter was being taken away from me. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that was colder than the air conditioning in the courthouse hallway. It was the coldness of clarity. It was the coldness of understanding that I could not rely on anyone but myself. It was the coldness of a decision being made. I looked at the courthouse walls around me. I looked at the legal system that had just taken my daughter. I looked at the city of Rio de Janeiro that suddenly felt like a prison. I looked at my reflection in the courthouse window, and I did not recognize the woman looking back at me. That woman was broken. That woman was defeated. That woman was a victim. But I was not going to be that woman for long. I made a decision in that hallway. A decision that would change the trajectory of my entire life. A decision that would require me to become someone I had never been before. A decision that would require me to destroy the people I loved in order to save the one person I loved most. I was going to disappear. I was going to leave Rio. I was going to leave my family. I was going to leave my pain and my history and my identity. And then, when I was strong enough, when I was powerful enough, I was going to come back and destroy everyone who had chosen money over my daughter. I blocked their numbers that day. All of them. My mother, my father, Chantel. I blocked them all. I did not tell them about the custody decision. I did not tell them that I had lost. I let them find out through family gossip weeks later. They would eventually hear from an aunt or a cousin that their daughter had lost custody of her child. But it would not come from me. I drove directly from the courthouse to my apartment. I packed one single bag with my essential possessions. I sold everything else that could be converted to cash. My furniture, my clothes, my books, everything. I sold it all on a classified ads website. A woman came to my apartment and bought my bed frame for 300 reais. A man came and bought my kitchen table for 200 reais. A young couple bought my television for 500 reais. I sold my laptop and bought a cheap tablet. I sold my dishes. I sold the decorations on my walls. I sold the things I had accumulated over 3 decades of life. Everything had a price, and I needed the cash. I had 12,000 reais when I was done. 12,000 reais in a suitcase and a heart that felt like it was made of ice. I drove from Rio de Janeiro to São Paulo on a Friday evening. The drive took 4 hours. 4 hours of driving north, away from my daughter, away from my parents, away from the life I had lived. I did not stop to cry. I did not stop to think. I just drove. I was 29 years old. I had no custody of my daughter. I had no home. I had no job. I had no family. But I had something else. I had a clarity that only comes from losing everything. I had a rage that could power 1,000 engines. I had a promise that I had made to my daughter, and I was going to keep it, no matter what it cost. I found a basement apartment in the Pinheiros neighborhood of São Paulo. It was dark and damp. The walls had water stains from years of moisture. The windows were small and barred. It smelled of mildew and old cooking oil. The previous tenants had cooked fish, and the smell had soaked into the walls. The landlord did not care about maintenance. He only cared about collecting rent. The rent was 800 reais a month. That was almost more than I could afford on my savings. But it was mine. It was a place where no one knew my name. No one knew I was the daughter of Roberto Vance, the powerful shipping magnate. No one knew I was the mother of a child I could not see. No one knew about the custody hearing, or the family betrayal, or the promise I had made in the darkness of that studio apartment in Rio. I was just a woman in a basement apartment trying to survive. I was nobody, and I was going to use that to become somebody. I started working the day after I arrived in São Paulo. I got a job answering phones at a boutique PR firm that handled scandals for politicians and business executives. It was a place where the rich came to fix their problems. It was a place where reputations were salvaged and stories were buried and truth was negotiated. The firm was called Obsidian Strategies, though at the time it was just a small operation with 10 employees. The owner was a woman named Lucia, who had been in the PR business for 20 years. She was ruthless and brilliant. She had handled some of the biggest scandals in Brazilian business and politics. She knew how to make things disappear. She knew how to make stories go away. I was the first one in the office at 5:30 in the morning. The office did not even open until 9, but I would arrive early and start organizing files, cleaning the office, preparing for the day. I was the last one to leave at midnight. I would stay late and file documents, shred papers that needed to be destroyed, reorganize the filing system. I fetched coffee that was worth more than my hourly wage. I shredded documents that contained secrets that could destroy powerful people. I filed papers. I answered phones. And I listened. I listened to how the rich and powerful cleaned up their messes. I listened to how they spun narratives. I listened to how they buried stories that could destroy them. I learned how image was everything. I learned how a narrative could be controlled. I learned how the truth could be negotiated. I learned how money could make problems go away. I studied the arrogance of the wealthy. I memorized their weaknesses. I learned their language. I learned how they thought. I learned what they feared. I learned their patterns and their habits and their vulnerabilities. And every single day, I thought about my daughter. Every single day, I touched the photo of Isabella on my desk, and I whispered, "I am coming for you, baby. Just wait. I am building something. I am becoming someone. And when I am strong enough, I am coming back for you. And everyone who hurt us is going to understand what they did." The photo showed her at age 6, taken just a few weeks before the custody hearing. She was wearing her favorite dress, the pink one with the flowers. She was smiling at the camera, and her smile was so wide, so trusting. She believed that her mother would protect her. She believed that I was strong. She believed that I would never let anything bad happen to her. I had failed her, but I was not going to fail her again. I turned my grief into fuel. I turned my rage into ambition. I stopped being Victoria the victim. I became Victoria the machine. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating regular meals. I stopped having a life outside of work. I ate instant noodles at my desk while I worked late into the night. I would sleep for 4 hours and then wake up ready to work again. The firm noticed my work ethic. After 3 months, they promoted me from receptionist to junior account manager. I was handling crisis management for executives. I was writing press releases. I was strategizing how to handle scandals. I was learning the business of deception. I worked on a case where a city councilman had been caught with a mistress. I helped craft a narrative where the mistress was positioned as a gold digger and the councilman was positioned as a victim of entrapment. The story went away. I worked on a case where a business executive had been caught embezzling from his company. I helped create a narrative where the executive was positioned as a victim of a vindictive business partner. The story was buried. I worked on a case where a politician had been caught using campaign funds for personal expenses. I helped create a narrative where the politician was positioned as a victim of accounting errors. The story disappeared from the media. I learned that truth was not as important as narrative. I learned that the right story, told to the right people, at the right time, could make anything go away. I learned that power was about controlling the story. And I was learning how to control stories. I built a fortress around my heart that no one could penetrate. I went on dates and felt nothing. I had friends and cared nothing for them. I earned promotions and felt empty. I made money and could not spend it. I was a shell of a person, a machine designed for a single purpose, to build power. And as the years passed, I did something else. I hired a private investigator. I paid him 2,000 rays a month to watch my family. I paid him to follow them. I paid him to report on them. I paid him to document their lives. I watched my parents from a distance. I knew everything about them. I knew that my father had taken out a third mortgage on the family estate to pay for the boutique. The boutique that was supposed to launch Chantel into the fashion world had instead become a financial burden that would not go away. I knew that the boutique was failing. The fashion market was changing. Online shopping was becoming more popular. The expensive boutique in Leblon could not compete with the convenience of shopping online. Customers were not coming to the physical space the way my parents had hoped. I knew that my parents were refinancing the debt, hoping for a miracle, hoping that somehow the business would turn around. But it was not turning around. It was getting worse every month. I watched my father make desperate financial decisions. He was no longer the confident shipping magnate. He was becoming a desperate man trying to hold together a house of cards that was trembling in the wind. He invested the last of his retirement fund into a real estate development project that turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. He lost everything. I watched my mother. I watched as the society women began to distance themselves from her. I watched as her board positions mysteriously opened up. She was asked to resign from the Botanical Garden Board. Her name began to disappear from the society pages. The woman who had cared more about what people thought than about her own granddaughter began to understand what it felt like to be judged by the same people she had been trying to impress. I watched my sister. Chantel's boutique lasted 3 years before it closed. The space that my parents had invested in so heavily was eventually converted into a bank branch. The beautiful marble that had cost so much was ripped out and replaced with corporate banking aesthetics. Chantel tried to work in fashion after that, but she had no training, no experience, no real skills. She lived off my parents' money, which was running out faster and faster. And I watched my daughter. The private investigator took photos for me. I knew where she went to school. I knew who her friends were. I knew that she was struggling with the transition to living with her father full-time. I knew that her father's new girlfriend was cruel to her. I knew that she had problems at school. I knew that she was angry and withdrawn and sad. On the weekends when I was supposed to have her, she would not talk to me for the first hour. She had built walls around her heart to protect herself from the pain of my absence. My daughter, at age 9, had learned to not rely on anyone. She had learned that mothers could disappoint you. She had learned that love was not enough to keep a family together. I would pick her up from her father's house on Friday evening, and she would sit in my car and look out the window and say nothing. I would try to make conversation. I would ask her about school, about her friends, about her week. She would give one-word answers. She would not make eye contact. It broke my heart, but I kept the pain inside. I kept it locked away. I used it as fuel. I used it as motivation. Every time I wanted to give up, every time I wanted to stop fighting, I would think about my daughter sitting in my car, unable to look at me, unable to trust me, unable to believe that I would fight for her. And I would work harder. I would push myself further. I would sacrifice more. 7 years after I left Rio, I had worked my way up to becoming the head of the account management team at Obsidian Strategies. I was managing multiple high-profile clients. I was handling crisis situations for some of the most powerful people in São Paulo. I was making a 6-figure salary. And then, at year 8, I did something that changed everything. I founded my own company, Obsidian Ventures. It was a venture capital firm, but it was different from other venture capital firms. We did not just invest in companies. We acquired distressed assets. We bought failed businesses. We salvaged broken portfolios. We took the wreckage of other people's mistakes and turned it into profit. I was ruthless. I was brilliant. I made decisions that made other people's lives harder and made me richer. I would identify companies that were failing, buy their debt at a discount, and then use that debt to extract maximum profit. I would acquire bankrupt businesses and restructure them to be profitable, which usually meant laying off workers and cutting costs. I was not doing this for charity. I was doing this to build power. I was doing this to become untouchable. I was doing this to prepare for the moment when I would have the power to come back and destroy everyone who had hurt me. By year 9, I was worth millions. I owned buildings. I owned pieces of companies. I owned debt. I was one of the most powerful women in São Paulo's financial world, and I was only 38 years old. And then, on year 9, to the day after the custody hearing, I received an email that changed everything. The subject line was simple: acquisition opportunity. The email was from a lawyer named Dr. Antonio, who represented my parents. He was asking if I would be interested in acquiring a commercial property that belonged to them. The property was the location of Chantel's failed boutique. The boutique had closed 5 years ago. The space had been sitting empty for 5 years. My parents had never found a tenant who would pay the asking price. The rent was too high. The location was oversaturated. The boutique had damaged the property's reputation. The mortgage on the property was crushing them. The property taxes were astronomical. The debt had grown to nearly 400,000 reais, because my parents had not been able to find a buyer. They were offering to sell me the property, the debt, and all the business assets for 130,000 reais. It was a bankruptcy price. It was an insulting price. It was the price of desperation. I smiled when I read that email. I smiled because I had been waiting for this moment for 9 years. I smiled because I knew exactly what was happening. My parents had finally run out of options. The banks were circling. The creditors were calling. My father had finally burned through enough money that even his shipping company was struggling. The financial advisors were telling him that he needed to liquidate assets to stay solvent. They needed someone to take this problem off their hands. They needed someone to save them from financial ruin. They needed a miracle. And they were hoping that I was still the desperate daughter they had abandoned 9 years ago. They were hoping that I had become successful enough to afford their problem. They were hoping that I would still want their approval enough to help them. They did not know who I had become. I called my lawyer. I told him to draw up an acquisition contract. I told him to make an offer. I told him to offer them 100,000 reais. Not 130. 100. It was an insult. It was what they deserved. My lawyer thought I was crazy. "Victoria," he said, $100,000 is far too low. They will never accept it. They will see it as disrespectful. Make the offer, I said. They will accept it. And within 24 hours, they did. They accepted my offer of 100,000 Rs for a property and business that they had invested 305,000 Rs in. But acquiring the property was just the beginning. I had much bigger plans for my family. I had been waiting 9 years for this moment, and I was not going to waste it. I hired forensic accountants. I had them dig through decades of my father's financial records. I was looking for evidence of wrongdoing. I was looking for illegal transfers. I was looking for fraud. I was looking for anything that would give me leverage. It took 6 months, but they found it. My father had been moving money illegally between his shipping company accounts and personal accounts for nearly 15 years. He had hidden assets from the tax authorities. He had made untraceable loans to himself. He had created shell companies to hide wealth. He had done everything wrong, and he had done it carefully. But not carefully enough. Not carefully enough to hide from someone who had learned to dig deeper than anyone else. Not carefully enough to hide from someone who was as ruthless as he was. I compiled everything into a file. Thousands of pages of evidence. Illegal transfers documented. Money laundering schemes exposed. Tax evasion records. Fraud evidence. Everything. And then I did something my parents never expected. I went to the tax authorities. I went with documentation. I went with evidence. I went with the truth. I went with forensic accountants who could testify to what they had found. The investigation that followed was swift and devastating. Federal agents showed up at my father's office. They had a warrant. They froze his accounts. They seized his properties. They took everything that his wealth had allowed him to hide for so many years. My father was charged with tax evasion, money laundering, and illegal financial transfers. The total amount missing from proper tax payment was over 1.2 million Rs. He was facing 3 to 5 years in federal prison. The news made headlines. Shipping magnate arrested on federal charges. Business leader faces prison time for tax evasion. Prominent family under investigation. My mother called me 3 days after the investigation started. I did not answer. I blocked the number immediately. She called me from different numbers. I blocked them all. She called me from my aunt's phone. I answered that one. "Victoria, please," she said, her voice shaking. "We do not understand what is happening. Your father has been arrested. They have frozen everything. They are saying horrible things about him. They are saying he is a criminal. Someone reported him to the tax authorities. We do not know who it was, but someone from inside the company must have done this. Please, if this is about the custody hearing, if this is about Isabella, we are sorry. We are so sorry. Please help us. Please make this go away. Please, baby. We need you." I listened to that voicemail without responding. I saved it. I would listen to it again many times in the coming weeks. And then I hung up the phone. I held a press conference at my office. I announced the launch of the Isabella Protection Foundation. It was a nonprofit dedicated to helping mothers fighting for custody of their children. I funded it with 5 million Rs of my own money. The foundation provided legal services to women who could not afford lawyers. It provided housing assistance. It provided job training. It provided everything that I had needed 9 years ago and had not received. And I made sure the press knew who funded it. I made sure they knew about a daughter taken away. I made sure they knew about parents who chose a failed boutique over a granddaughter. I made sure they knew about a family that had to choose between prestige and love, and chose prestige. The story went viral in Rio's business circles. "Shipping magnate's daughter creates foundation after custody battle," was the headline. Journalists dug into the story. They found out about my custody hearing 9 years ago. They found out about the boutique that had been built instead of helping me. They found out about the price of my parents' greed. The media crucified my parents. The story was covered on every news channel. It was discussed on talk shows. It was analyzed by business commentators. My parents' faces were splashed across newspapers with headlines like "The Cost of Greed" and "When Money Matters More Than Family." My father's sentencing was national news. He received 3 years in federal prison. He would serve his time in a facility for white-collar criminals, but it was prison nonetheless. The great shipping magnate, The man who had commanded respect in every room he entered was now an inmate. He had to wear a prison uniform. He had to eat prison food. He had to sleep in a small cell with another prisoner. My mother was forced to sell nearly everything. The penthouse apartment on Avenida Paulista was sold to cover legal fees and penalties. The vacation property in Bucios was sold. The art collection was liquidated. The jewelry was auctioned. She was left with a small apartment in a middle-class neighborhood and barely enough money to survive. She had to get a job. At 58 years old, she had to get a job at a clothing store, something she had never done in her life. She had to work retail. She had to interact with customers. She had to be nice to people who did not know who she was. She had to earn minimum wage. It was a humiliation that was almost impossible for her to bear. Chantel's social life imploded. The friends who had attended the grand opening of the boutique disappeared. She tried to leverage her family name in the fashion world, but that name had become toxic. It was the name of a family that had sacrificed their daughter for prestige. It was the name of a family that had stolen from the church, that had committed fraud, that had let a child die for a party. She was 37 years old and had never worked a day in her life. She was not employable. She had no skills. She had no experience. She had only the memory of a boutique that had cost her father millions and her family everything. She moved back in with my mother. They lived together in a small apartment in a middle-class neighborhood. They both worked retail jobs. They both understood what it felt like to be powerless. And me? I became the woman who had taken everything from them. But I was not done yet. 9 years after losing custody, I finally had the power and resources I needed. I went back to court. I presented evidence of my father's criminal conviction. I presented evidence of my mother's inability to provide a stable home. I presented evidence that Isabella had been suffering under her father's care. I had documentation of Isabella's poor school performance after the custody change. I had documentation of behavioral problems. I had documentation of sadness and withdrawal. I had documented that my ex-husband's house was not actually stable, that he had debts, that he was not the responsible parent he had claimed to be. I had hired private investigators to follow him. I had documented every mistake he made as a parent. The judge was different this time. Judge Helena Souza had retired. The new judge was Judge Paulo Costa, and he was more sympathetic to my case. He looked at the evidence. He listened to the testimony. He awarded me full custody of Isabella, who was now 15 years old. She did not know, at first, what I had done. She did not know that I had spent 9 years building an empire to come back for her. She did not know that every decision I had made, every business deal I had closed, every ethical line I had crossed, had been done with her in mind. When she first learned about the custody change, she was confused. She had lived with her father for 9 years. She had built a life in his house. She had friends in his neighborhood. She was used to her routine. And now her mother was taking her away. But when she was older, when she was strong enough to understand the complexity of what had happened, I told her the truth. I told her about the money I had asked for. I told her about the boutique that had cost 305,000 reais. I told her about the day I lost her. I told her about my promise. I told her about the nights I slept in my car. I told her about the office buildings I cleaned. I told her about the desperation I felt. I told her about the moment I decided to build an empire to come back for her. She cried. But then she held me. She told me that she had always known her mother would come back for her. She had always believed. I took my daughter to a lawyer's office. I made her a beneficiary of my will. I set up trust funds for her future. I made sure that she would never be vulnerable the way I had been vulnerable. I made sure that she would never have to beg for help. I made sure that she would understand the price of what her grandparents had chosen. I took Isabella to a cemetery in São Paulo where I had saved a photo from 9 years ago. I placed it on a bench overlooking the city. It was the photo of her at age 6, taken just before the custody hearing. The photo where she was wearing her favorite pink dress and smiling that trusting smile. "Do you remember?" I asked her. "I remember you," she said, taking my hand. "I remember that you came back." That night, I sat in my office on the 42nd floor of a building I owned, and I looked at the news on my computer screen. There was a story about the Isabella Protection Foundation. It had expanded to 3 other states. It had helped 15,000 families. 15,000 mothers had gotten custody back. 15,000 children had stayed with their mothers. The headline read, "Venture Capitalists Foundation helps thousands of mothers regain custody after legal battles." I thought about my parents. My father was in prison, serving his sentence, living in a small cell, eating prison food, wearing a prison uniform. My mother was living in a small apartment in a middle-class neighborhood, working a minimum wage job at a clothing store, something she had never done in her life. Chantel was living with her, also working minimum wage jobs, also understanding what it felt like to be powerless and poor. They were not the worst off people in the world. There were people with real problems, real suffering, but they had had everything, and they had thrown it away for prestige, and now they had nothing. I did not feel pity for them. I did not feel sadness. I felt the cool, clean sensation of absolute justice. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a piece of paper. It was the original custody decision from 9 years ago, the document that had taken my daughter away from me. I read it one more time, even though I had read it 1,000 times before. The judge's words, the language that had ripped my family apart, the legal document that had changed the trajectory of my entire life. And then I tore it to shreds. I ripped it to pieces, slowly and deliberately. Each tear was a release. Each piece that fell to the ground was a weight lifting from my shoulders. The pieces fluttered to the floor like dead leaves, and I felt lighter than I had felt in 9 years. I picked up my phone and texted my daughter one final message, a message I had been waiting 9 years to send. I told you I would come back for you. I told you that someday they would understand what they lost when they lost us. Sleep well, my love. Your mother is finally home. She texted back 3 words. I believe you. The most profound lesson from this story is that true wealth is measured not in the money you accumulate, but in the people who would sacrifice everything for you. My family chose a failing business over a granddaughter, proving that prestige without heart is just an expensive tomb that eventually crushes you under its own weight. Their downfall illustrates the inevitable law of karma. You cannot build a legacy on the sacrifice of your children and expect it to survive. You cannot prioritize image over love and expect the world to respect you. You cannot choose money over family and expect to end up anywhere but alone. Ultimately, this story reminds us that a mother's love is the most powerful force on earth. It can move mountains. It can build empires. It can destroy the people who dare to stand against it. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply thriving, while the people who hurt you watch from the ruins they created. My parents wanted to be remembered for their wealth and their status. They wanted to be remembered for the boutique they had built and the parties they had thrown. They wanted a legacy built on sand and champagne and imported marble, but they will be remembered for the price they paid for greed, and I will be remembered for the empire I built to save the one they abandoned. Isabella is 18 now. She is in university, studying international business. She carries my strength in her eyes. She carries my determination in her spine. And she carries the knowledge that her mother loved her enough to move heaven and earth to come back for her. The Isabella Protection Foundation has now helped 50,000 families. 50,000 children have been kept with their mothers because of the money I earned, the decisions I made, the empire I built. Every child saved is a victory against my parents' greed. Every dollar spent on legal help is an act of defiance against their cruelty. My ex-husband eventually lost his custody battle. He could not compete with my resources, my determination, my willingness to dig deeper than he was willing to go. He realized that he could not win against a woman who had already lost everything she cared about and had rebuilt herself into something unstoppable. My father is still in prison. He has 2 more years. My mother visits him sometimes. She has told me that he has changed, that he understands now what he did, that he regrets sacrificing his daughter for a party. But regret does not change the past. Regret does not undo 9 years of absence. Regret does not heal the wounds that were carved into my heart when my daughter called for me and I could not come. I do not forgive them. I do not hate them. I simply acknowledge that they made a choice, and choices have consequences. I am the consequence, and I sleep well at night knowing that every child saved by my foundation is a victory against their greed. Every dollar spent on legal help is an act of defiance against their cruelty. They refused to pay 22,000 reais to save 1 child. So I have spent millions to save 50,000. That is my legacy. That is the empire I built. That is the revenge I have earned. I am Victoria Vance. I am 38 years old. I am the founder and CEO of Obsidian Ventures, the most successful venture capital firm in Brazil. I am the founder of the Isabella Protection Foundation. I am the mother of a brilliant daughter who knows that her mother loved her enough to burn the world down. And I am not done yet. There are still mothers out there who need help. There are still children being taken away from the parents who love them most. There are still families being torn apart by a system that values money over love. And I will not stop until every mother has the resources to fight for her child. I will not stop until every child knows that their mother will move heaven and earth to keep them. I will not stop until the price of greed is understood by everyone who makes the choice to sacrifice family for status. This is my promise. This is my purpose. This is my legacy. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure that no other mother experiences what I experienced. No other daughter loses what I lost. No other family is torn apart by the choice between prestige and love. Because I have learned the hard way that love is worth more than any amount of money. And I will spend my entire fortune making sure that every mother knows that she is not alone, that she is not powerless, that her love for her child is the most powerful weapon she possesses. I am Victoria. I am a mother who would burn the world down for her daughter. And I am a woman who has learned to turn her pain into power. This is my story. This is my legacy. And this is just the beginning.